Okay, so continuing on with AUC section 230 regarding audit documentation, still in the introductory section of this AUC, but it gives us a good explanation of why we need audit documentation. It's in section nature and purposes of audit documentation and AUC sections 230.02 and 03. So it says when we prepare audit documentation in line with the requirements of this AUC section as well as other AUC sections, we are providing evidence of the auditor's basis for their conclusion about the achievement of the overall objectives of the auditor. And those were discussed in a video in AUC section 200. But those are two objectives, say that we obtain reasonable assurance that about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement as a whole, and that we also report on our findings on those financial statements. So by providing audit documentation, we are providing evidence for our conclusions that we achieved those objectives. And by having audit documentation, we are providing evidence that the audit was planned and performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and other requirements that we might be under. So basically, this audit documentation backs up the claim that we did what we were supposed to under the rules and standards that we were under. And what we said we were going to do in our engagement letter, that's what we did. Additionally, the audit documentation might assist the engagement team to plan and perform the audit. So having documentation of certain things might allow other engagement team members to review that information and help them in the particular areas that they're working in. It might also help members of the engagement team that are responsible for supervising others. So if we have audit documentation, there's something for those engagement team supervisors to review and to supervise. Having audit documentation also enables the engagement team to demonstrate that it's accountable for its work by documenting the procedures it performed and the audit evidence it examined and the conclusions that it reached. Having audit documentation also might help us in future audits where we can see what all we did in the prior year and what information we looked at that may help us in planning and performing the audit of future years. Audit documentation also helps in quality control reviews and in external inspections like peer reviews. It allows us to fulfill our responsibility to subsequent auditors. If another auditor takes our client, we have the audit documentation in place to provide to them as the predecessor auditor. And as we mentioned, there's the ability to see what we did in prior years to assess what needs to be done in planning and performing the audit in future years. I think this one, record of matters of continuing significance for future audits, means more in line with perhaps there's a long-term note payable, then we can keep documentation of the amortization and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of good reasons here for us to have audit documentation. This is not only for our own in order to fulfill our responsibilities as the auditor, but keeping audit documentation also helps us to develop an audit plan and perform the audit efficiently and effectively, not only in the current year, but in future years as well.